I want to talk to you about the one mistake that kept me from making real money for longer than it should have. Not the money I eventually made. The money I left on the table for years because I was operating under a framework that felt right, sounded intelligent, and was completely wrong. You probably think the way to increase your income is to get better at what you do. That is the assumption most people carry without examining it. They believe income follows skill. They believe compensation tracks competence. They think if they can just improve their craft, refine their expertise, become undeniably good at their work, the money will follow naturally. This is what I believed for a long time. This is what I watched brilliant people believe while they stayed broke. The logic seems airtight. You look around and you see that skilled people make more than unskilled people. You see that experts command higher fees than beginners. You see that mastery appears to correlate with wealth. So you conclude that the path to higher income is the path to higher skill. You dedicate yourself to becoming better. You study, you practice, you refine, you pour hours into your craft because you have been told and you believe that excellence is rewarded. I believed this completely when I started. I thought the reason Apple would succeed was because we were going to build better computers. I thought the reason I would make money was because I understood technology and design better than other people. I thought my value was located in my ability to see what a product should be and then build it. I spent years operating inside this framework. I made decisions based on it. I prioritized based on it. I measured my progress based on it. And I was wrong. Not wrong that skill matters. Wrong that skill is what determines income. Those are not the same thing. Skill determines whether you can do the work. Income is determined by something else entirely. I did not understand this distinction for years, and it cost me. Here is what I watched happen, over and over. I would see someone with extraordinary skill, someone who understood computers or design or engineering at a level that deserved respect, and they would be making nothing. Not struggling. Not underpaid. Making literally nothing of significance relative to their ability. Then I would see someone with a fraction of that skill, someone who could not do the work at even a competent level, and they would be making fortunes. This happened too many times to ignore. It was not an anomaly. It was a pattern. The easy explanation is that the world is unfair, that talent is not rewarded, that we live in a system that does not recognize merit. I heard this explanation constantly. I heard it from people who were brilliant and broke. They would tell me the system was rigged, that luck mattered more than skill, that success was about who you knew or where you went to school or what family you were born into. They had endless reasons why their skill had not translated into income, and all of those reasons were external. I did not buy it, not because I thought the world was fair, but because the explanation did not actually explain what I was seeing. It did not explain why some people with no connections made millions. It did not explain why some people from wealthy families with every advantage stayed mediocre. It did not explain why two people with nearly identical backgrounds and skill levels would have completely different financial outcomes. The external explanation was too convenient. It let you off the hook. It meant you did not have to examine what you were actually doing wrong. So I started paying attention differently. I stopped listening to what people said about why they succeeded or failed. I stopped looking at their skill level or their background. I started looking at what they actually spent their time doing. Not what they said they valued, not what they intended to do. What they actually did, day after day, when no one was watching and nothing was forcing their hand. What I found was this. The people who made money spent their time on things that directly generated income. The people who did not make money spent their time on things that felt like progress, but had no mechanism to produce income. This sounds obvious when I say it like that, but it is not obvious when you are inside it. When you are inside it, both activities feel productive. Both feel like work. Both feel like you are moving forward. Let me be specific. I would watch engineers spend months perfecting a feature that no customer had asked for and no customer would pay extra to have. They would work nights and weekends on it. They would take pride in it. They would genuinely believe they were adding value. And they were adding value in the sense that the product was marginally better. But they were not adding income because no one was willing to pay more for that improvement. The effort was real. The skill was real. The result was real. The income was not. At the same time, I would watch someone else spend 3 hours talking to customers, figuring out what problem was costing them the most money, and then building the simplest possible solution to that problem. Not the best solution, not the most elegant solution, the simplest solution that removed the pain. And customers would pay immediately, not because the solution was impressive, because it made them money or saved them money or removed something that was blocking them from making money. The difference was not skill. The engineer building the perfect feature had more skill. The difference was not effort. Both people were working hard. The difference was that one person was working on something that had a direct path to income, and the other person was working on something that felt important but had no such path. This is where the mistake lives, not in the decision to build skill, not in the commitment to excellence. The mistake lives in the assumption about what skill actually does for you. I want you to see this clearly because I spent years unable to see it myself. Skill gives you capability. Skill means you can do something well. Skill means when an opportunity presents itself, you are ready to execute. Skill is the price of entry, the foundation, the requirement for doing work that matters. But skill does not create the opportunity. Skill does not make someone willing to pay. Skill does not generate the moment when money changes hands. I thought it did. I watched brilliant engineers at Apple people who understood systems at a level I could barely comprehend, and I assumed their expertise would translate directly into compensation. I watched designers who could see solutions invisible to everyone else, and I believed the market would automatically reward that vision. It did not. What I saw instead, over and over, was this. The most skilled person in the room would spend months perfecting something, refining it, making it objectively better by every technical measure. And then someone else, often someone with half the skill, would have a 15-minute conversation with a customer, identify a problem, propose a solution, and generate more income in that quarter than the skilled person had generated all year. The pattern was too consistent to ignore. I started tracking it, not formally, not with spreadsheets or analysis, but I paid attention to who made money and what they actually did with their time. The engineers who stayed late perfecting code architecture brilliant work, genuinely important for long-term product stability, generated no income. The product was going to ship either way. Customers were going to buy it either way. The perfection mattered to the engineer. It did not matter to the transaction, but the person who noticed that customers kept calling support about the same problem, who built a simple tool that prevented that problem, who then told every customer about it, that person generated income. Not because they were more skilled, because they created a new reason for money to change hands. Do you see the difference? One person made the product better. The other person made someone willing to pay. I am not saying the first activity is worthless. Product quality matters enormously. Long-term thinking matters. Technical excellence matters. I am saying it does not generate income. And if you spend all your time on activities that do not generate income, your income will not grow. Not because you are not working hard, not because you are not skilled, because you are not doing the thing that actually produces the result you want. This sounds obvious when I say it plainly. But watch what you do with your time this week. Watch what you believe is productive. I watched myself. I tracked my own hours for a month, years ago, when I first started to suspect I had this wrong. I wrote down everything I did and then asked myself one question about each activity. Does this create a moment when someone becomes willing to pay or willing to pay more? The results horrified me. 80% of what I called work had no mechanism to generate income. I was learning new programming techniques, valuable for capability, no path to payment. I was refining product features that were already good enough, satisfying to perfect. No one would pay extra for the refinement. I was reading about industry trends and new technologies, important for staying current, completely disconnected from any transaction. I was attending meetings about process improvements, useful for efficiency, generated exactly $0. And then I looked at the 20% of activities that did have a direct path to income. Talking to customers about problems they would pay to solve, building something someone had already said they would buy, having conversations that ended with "how much?" or "when can you start?" Asking existing customers what else they needed, following up on proposals. That was it. That was the entire list of activities that actually generated income. Everything else, no matter how skilled, how sophisticated, how genuinely important, was something different. It was maintenance, it was preparation, it was capability building. But it was not income generation. And here is what made this realization so painful. I was good at the 80%. I enjoyed the 80%. The 80% felt like meaningful work. It felt productive to get better at my craft, to refine products, to stay current with technology, to improve processes. The 20% felt uncomfortable. Talking to customers meant hearing complaints, hearing that what I built was not quite right, hearing that what I thought was brilliant was actually solving the wrong problem. Building what someone asked for, rather than what I wanted to build, felt like compromise. Having conversations about money felt transactional, less pure than the craft. Following up felt like sales, and I did not see myself as a salesperson. So I avoided the 20%. Not consciously, not explicitly. But in the daily choices about where to spend my time, I naturally gravitated toward activities that felt like progress but had no mechanism to produce income. I told myself I was building skills that would pay off later. I told myself quality would eventually be recognized. I told myself the market would reward excellence. And my income stayed flat. Not because the market was broken, not because customers did not value quality, not because I was not working hard enough, because I was not spending time on activities that generated income. You probably think you are different. You probably think you spend your time on income-generating activities. Let me ask you 3 questions, and I want you to answer them honestly. In the last week, how many conversations did you have with someone who has the authority and willingness to pay you? In the last week, how many hours did you spend building something someone has already committed to buying? In the last week, how many times did you follow up with someone who expressed interest in paying you? Now add up those hours. That number, that total represents the maximum possible income-generating time in your week. Everything else, no matter how important, no matter how skilled, was something different. I am not saying that other time is wasted. I am saying it does not generate income. And if you want your income to grow, you need to be brutally honest about the difference. When I finally accepted this, when I finally stopped lying to myself about what actually generated income, everything changed. Not because I worked harder. I was already working hard. Not because I got more skilled. I was already skilled. Because I reallocated my time. I started spending half my time not 20% on activities with a direct path to income. Talking to customers, understanding problems, building solutions people had already said they would pay for, following up, asking for the sale. It felt wrong at first. It felt like I was neglecting the craft. It felt like I was abandoning excellence for commerce. But my income doubled in 6 months. Not because I got twice as good at my work, because I spent twice as much time on the activities that actually generated income. And here is what I learned that I did not expect. The skills I had built, all those hours perfecting my craft, they mattered enormously. But they mattered in the 20%, not the 80%. When I talked to a customer, my skill meant I could accurately assess whether I could solve their problem. When I built a solution, my skill meant I could build it quickly and well. When I proposed a price, my skill gave me confidence that I could deliver value. The skill was essential, but the skill was not what generated the income. The conversation generated the income. The solution to their specific problem generated the income. The proposal and the follow-up generated the income. Skill made those activities possible, but the activities themselves were what produced the result. This is the mistake that permanently limits income. Believing that building skill is the same thing as building income. It is not. Skill is necessary. Skill is foundational. Skill is what makes you capable. But income comes from something else entirely. Income comes from creating moments when someone becomes willing to pay. And if you are not spending significant time creating those moments, your income will stay limited. Not because you are not good enough, because you are not doing the thing that produces the result. I want to show you what happened when I started teaching this to people, because what I discovered next changed everything I thought I understood about why some people break through and others stay stuck. I expected that once I explained the framework skill versus income-generating activities, people would see it immediately. They would recognize the pattern in their own lives. They would reallocate their time the same way I had. Some did exactly that, but most did not. And the ones who did not had the same reaction. They would nod. They would agree with the logic. They would acknowledge they were spending too much time on activities with no mechanism to generate income. Then they would go back to doing exactly what they had always done. I watched a designer I knew spend 6 months building a portfolio website. He redesigned it 3 times. He agonized over typography, over load times, over the exact shade of gray for the background. The site was beautiful, genuinely beautiful. He showed it to me with pride. I asked him how many clients had come from it. None. I asked him how many potential clients he had spoken to while building it. None. I asked him what would have happened if he had spent those 6 months talking to 10 potential clients per week instead. He looked at me like I had suggested he stop breathing. "I need the portfolio first," he said. "Nobody hires you without seeing your work." I knew designers who got hired every week without portfolios. They got hired because they called people, because they asked questions, because they understood expensive problems and could articulate solutions. Their portfolio was a conversation. But he could not hear that. He went back to his website. Last I heard, he was adding case studies. Still no clients. This was not stupidity. This was not laziness. This was something else. I started paying attention to the pattern. I talked to dozens of people who understood the framework intellectually, but could not implement it practically. A software engineer who agreed he should spend more time talking to potential customers. He scheduled 3 calls. Then he canceled 2 of them to fix a bug in a feature nobody was using. "I just needed to get it working properly first," he said. A consultant who knew she should be reaching out to past clients with new offers. Instead, she spent 2 months creating a certification program to add credentials to her email signature. "People take you more seriously when you have credentials," she explained. A product manager who acknowledged he was spending too much time in planning meetings that generated no income. He committed to spending 3 hours per week talking to customers about their problems. First week, 0 hours. Second week, 30 minutes. Third week, back to 0. Things got busy, he said. They all understood the concept. None of them changed their behavior, and I realized I was watching the same thing I had done for years. I had known intellectually that my income was not limited by my skill. I had known I was spending time on activities that could not generate income, but knowing did not change what I did. There was something else operating, something underneath the logic. I started asking different questions. I asked the designer, "When you work on your portfolio, how do you feel?" "Productive," he said immediately, "like I'm making progress." "And when you think about calling potential clients?" He hesitated. "Anxious, like I'm bothering people, like I don't have anything valuable to offer yet." I asked the engineer, "When you fix bugs in your code, how does that feel?" "Satisfying. I can see the problem, I can solve it, I can verify it is solved." "And when you think about talking to customers about their problems?" "Uncomfortable. I do not know what they will say. I do not know if I can help them. It feels uncertain." I asked the consultant, "When you work on your certification, what is that like?" "Safe. I am learning. I am improving. I am building credibility." "And when you think about reaching out to past clients?" "Scary. What if they say no? What if they do not remember me? What if I am interrupting them?" The pattern was clear. Activities that do not generate income feel productive, satisfying, safe. Activities that generate income feel uncertain, uncomfortable, risky. And we are not wired to choose discomfort over comfort. We are not wired to choose uncertainty over certainty. We are not wired to choose risk over safety. We are wired to do what feels like progress. And this is the second part of the mistake. The first part is believing skill determines income. That is the intellectual error. The second part is that income-generating activities feel wrong. That is the emotional barrier. They feel like you are doing something before you are ready. They feel like you are bothering people. They feel like you are selling, and selling feels manipulative. They feel uncertain because you cannot control the outcome. They feel risky because rejection is possible. They feel uncomfortable because you are asking someone to make a decision about you. Meanwhile, skill-building activities feel right. They feel like preparation. They feel like you are getting ready for the moment when you will be good enough. They feel productive because you can see tangible progress. They feel safe because you control the outcome. They feel comfortable because nobody is judging you. And so we choose them, not consciously, not deliberately, but we choose them. We tell ourselves we are preparing. We tell ourselves we need one more skill, one more credential, one more project before we are ready to talk to customers, to make offers, to ask for money. We tell ourselves we are being responsible, professional, thorough. We are actually just avoiding discomfort. I know this because I did it for years. I told myself I needed to understand the technology better before I could sell it. I needed the product to be more polished before I could show it to customers. I needed more experience before I could command higher rates. All of that sounded reasonable. All of that was avoidance. The truth was simpler and more embarrassing. I did not want to hear someone say no. I did not want to feel the discomfort of asking someone to pay me. I did not want to face the uncertainty of a conversation I could not control. So I wrote code instead. I refined features. I read documentation. I stayed busy. I stayed comfortable. I stayed broke. And the moment I understood this, really understood, it was the moment everything changed. Not because I suddenly became comfortable with discomfort, but because I stopped waiting to feel ready. I stopped treating my discomfort as evidence I was doing something wrong. I started treating my discomfort as evidence I was doing something that could actually generate income. I made a list of every activity that made me uncomfortable. Calling someone I did not know to ask about their problems. Showing unfinished work to a potential customer. Naming a price higher than I thought I was worth. Following up with someone who had not responded. Asking someone who seemed happy with their current solution if they would consider switching. Every single item on that list was an income-generating activity. Every single item on that list was something I had been avoiding. I made a second list of every activity that made me feel productive and safe. Refactoring code that already worked. Learning a new framework I did not need yet. Attending conferences about industry trends. Reorganizing my project management system. Reading books about business strategy. Every single item on that list was an activity with no mechanism to generate income. Every single item on that list was something I had been prioritizing. I had been using my feelings as a guide, and my feelings had been guiding me away from income. This is what I started teaching people. Not just the framework of skill versus income-generating activities, but the emotional reality underneath it. The people who broke through were the ones who could name this pattern in themselves. They could say, I am avoiding this because it is uncomfortable, not because it is not valuable. They could say, I am doing this because it feels productive, not because it will generate income. They could separate the feeling of progress from actual progress. And once they could see that distinction, they could make a different choice. Not because they stopped feeling uncomfortable, but because they stopped letting discomfort make the decision. The designer who finally started calling potential clients told me, every single call, I feel like I am bothering someone, but I make the call anyway. And half the time they thank me for reaching out. The engineer who started talking to customers said, it never stops feeling uncertain. But I have learned that uncertainty means I am in a conversation that could go somewhere. The consultant who started reaching out to past clients said, I still feel scared before I hit send, but I have sent enough emails now to know that feeling scared does not mean I should not send it. They did not overcome the discomfort. They just stopped obeying it, and their income changed. Not because they got better at their craft, because they got better at doing things that felt wrong. I want to tell you about a conversation I had in 1997. I had just come back to Apple. The company was 90 days from bankruptcy. Everyone knew it. The press knew it. Our competitors knew it. Our employees knew it. And I sat in a conference room with a team of engineers who wanted to show me what they had been working on. Brilliant people. Truly brilliant. They had spent 18 months building a technology framework that would let developers write applications faster. Elegant architecture, beautiful code. They walked me through it for 2 hours. I asked them one question. How many developers have you talked to about this? The room went quiet. How many developers have told you they need this specific thing? How many have said they would use it if you built it? One of them said, we have not done formal user research yet. We wanted to get the technology right first. 18 months. Not one conversation with the people who would actually use what they were building. This is not a story about those engineers being foolish. They were doing exactly what felt right, what felt productive, what felt like real work. Building, perfecting, solving hard technical problems. But Apple was dying because the entire company had been doing what felt productive instead of what generated income. And I had done the same thing for years before I learned to see it. The mistake has a mechanism, a specific way it operates in your daily decisions. And until you see the mechanism clearly, you cannot stop it from controlling you. Here is how it works. You wake up in the morning with a list of things you could do. Some of those things would move you directly toward income. Some would build your skills, some would do neither. The income-generating activities feel uncertain. They require you to reach out to someone who might reject you. or to ask for something you might not get, or to have a conversation where you do not control the outcome. The skill-building activities feel certain. You control them completely. You can start them, work on them, finish them. You can see progress. You can feel accomplished. So you do the skill-building activities, not because you decided they were more important. You probably did not decide anything consciously. You just did what felt like productive work. And the mechanism is invisible to you because the skill-building activities are productive. They do improve your capability. They are real work. You are not procrastinating. You are not being lazy. You are working hard on something legitimate. That is why the mistake is so effective at limiting income. It does not feel like a mistake. It feels like responsible professional development. I watched this mechanism operate in myself for years before I recognized it. I would spend days perfecting a product feature that no customer had asked for, while avoiding the conversation with a potential partner who could distribute our product to millions of people. The feature felt like progress. The conversation felt like I was bothering someone. The feature let me stay in control. The conversation required me to be vulnerable to rejection. So I worked on the feature. And I told myself I was being productive. I told myself I was building something great. I told myself that great products sell themselves. All of that was true enough to be convincing, but none of it generated income. The mechanism works the same way in every profession I have observed. The writer spends another week revising the manuscript instead of sending query letters to agents. Revision is real work. It does improve the manuscript, but it does not generate income. Sending query letters generates income, but query letters mean rejection. So the writer revises. The consultant builds another framework for client engagements instead of calling past clients to ask if they need anything. The framework is valuable. It will make future engagements better, but it does not generate income. Calling past clients generates income, but calling feels like bothering people. So the consultant builds frameworks. The developer adds another feature to their application instead of reaching out to the 10 people who signed up last month to ask what would make them pay for a premium version. The feature might be useful. It demonstrates skill, but it does not generate income. Asking what people would pay for generates income, but asking feels pushy. So the developer codes. Same mechanism every time. The income-generating activity requires uncertainty, vulnerability, possible rejection. The skill-building activity offers control, visible progress, the feeling of accomplishment. So you choose skill-building. And you do not notice you chose it. It just feels like you are working on what is in front of you. This is where most advice about productivity and time management fails completely. That advice assumes your problem is that you are wasting time. It assumes you need better systems to focus on important work. But you are not wasting time. You are focused. You are working on important things. You are just working on the wrong category of important things. You are working on things that build capability instead of things that generate income. And no productivity system will fix that if the system does not distinguish between those two categories. I have seen people implement elaborate time-blocking systems, priority matrices, goal-setting frameworks. They become extremely efficient at doing skill-building work. They produce more output. They finish more projects. Their income does not change because they optimized the wrong activities. They needed to spend less time on the things they were already doing efficiently and more time on the things they were avoiding because those things felt uncomfortable. The solution is not better time management. The solution is recognizing the mechanism in the moment it operates. You are sitting at your desk. You could call that potential client. Or you could improve your portfolio. Both seem like reasonable uses of time. Notice which one feels more comfortable. Notice which one you have more control over. Notice which one lets you avoid vulnerability. That is the one you will choose unless you actively recognize what is happening. I started keeping a record of these moments. Every time I noticed myself choosing between an income-generating activity and a skill-building activity, I wrote down which one I chose and why it felt right to choose it. The pattern was obvious within a week. I chose skill building 19 times out of 20. And every time I had a reason that sounded legitimate. I needed to understand the technology better before talking to partners. I needed to refine the presentation before showing it to investors. I needed to fix this problem before I could focus on sales. All reasonable sounding. All ways of avoiding the discomfort of income-generating activities. When I forced myself to choose the income-generating activity instead, something interesting happened. The activity usually took less time than I expected. The conversation I had been avoiding for 3 days took 20 minutes. The email I had been drafting and redrafting took 5 minutes to write and send once I stopped perfecting it. And the outcome was often better than the outcome from days of skill building. 20 minutes talking to a potential partner generated more forward movement than 3 days of perfecting product features. Not because the product features did not matter, they did matter, but they mattered less than I thought, and they mattered later in the process than I thought. What mattered first was whether anyone wanted what I was building enough to pay for it. And I could only learn that through the uncomfortable activity of asking. This is the part that feels wrong to people when I explain it. It sounds like I am saying skill does not matter, or that you should stop improving your craft, or that you should sell things that are not ready. I am not saying any of that. I am saying that the relationship between skill building and income is not what you think it is. Skill building is necessary, but it is not sufficient. And spending more time on it does not increase income proportionally. There is a threshold of skill required to deliver value. You need to cross that threshold. But once you cross it, additional skill building produces diminishing returns on income while income-generating activities produce increasing returns. And most people I have observed are already past the threshold. They already have enough skill to deliver value to someone. They do not have an income problem because they lack skill. They have an income problem because they spend their time building more skill instead of connecting that skill to people who will pay for it. The designer who spent 6 months on a portfolio already had enough skill to help clients in month 1. The additional 5 months made the portfolio better. But it did not make clients appear. Clients appeared when the designer finally started calling them. The engineer who canceled client calls to fix features already had a working product. The fixes made it better, but they did not create customers. Customers came from the calls the engineer was canceling. Your skill is probably not your constraint. Your willingness to do the uncomfortable work of connecting your skill to income is your constraint. And until you see that clearly, you will keep choosing comfort over income while telling yourself you are being productive.